We had a lot to tackle here in the wake of South Carolina, and even more on Super Tuesday next Sunday. Just a reminder that we will be back at 11 Eastern, and we'll see you all then with the latest buzz.
New information on the deadly coronavirus. Federal health officials saying a patient in Chicago tested positive last night, which could make it at least 63 total confirmed U.S. cases now. This comes as authorities investigate a potential outbreak at a nursing facility in Washington state, where the virus has also claimed its first life inside the U.S., a man in his 50s near Seattle. Hello, everyone, and welcome to America's News Headquarters. I'm Arthel Neville.
Hello, Arthel. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Eric Shawn. You know, the majority of cases that have hit us so far come from those people who were evacuated from China and that cruise ship that was in Japan. But there are now suspected community transmission cases, those in California and Oregon. That means people who are infected, who have not traveled to any affected country or contacted anyone with the virus as far as it is known. Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar was on Fox News Sunday this morning, and he stressed, despite the concerns, that the risk to the average American does remain low.
At this point, it's a suspected community transmission, yes.
And that's concerning, right?
Any community transmission is concerning. That's why we've been very clear from the outset. We're going to have more cases here in the United States in spite of the president's aggressive efforts at containment.
So, more cases expected. Christina Coleman with the very latest from our West Coast Bureau. Christina?
Well, Eric, more than 15,000 test kits are going out to health departments across the country to test for the virus today. This comes after problems with one of the three components of an initial test that was sent out to states, and after complaints that some places like California simply didn't have enough tests to adequately handle a possible growing number of cases. Vice President Mike Pence, who was heading the coronavirus task force, addressed concerns over test kits today on Sunday Morning Futures.
We believe we are in the process of resolving the issues about testing kits. As we speak, literally more than 15,000 kits are going out to the relevant areas, and we'll soon be sending another 50,000 that are going to be made commercially available out to states.
Pence says the risk of coronavirus to the general public remains low, but that the government is prepared for more cases to emerge. Rhode Island is now reporting its first presumptive positive case of coronavirus. This in addition to new cases in Illinois and in Santa Clara County here in California. The Santa Clara County case is that county's fourth case, and the woman affected is a direct contact of the case officials announced on Friday. Now, these new cases come at the same time as we're learning of the first coronavirus death on U.S. soil, a man from Washington state with underlying health conditions. Federal health officials are now looking into possible cases of community spread along the West Coast in Washington, Oregon, and here in California. They're trying to track down the source of the illness in these different places.
When you have the cases that we're having now in Washington state and in Oregon, it becomes much more challenging because you got to do much more intensive contact tracing in addition to the isolation.
The new cases that are presumed positive are pending lab confirmation by the CDC. Federal health officials are expecting more cases here in the U.S., but they're encouraging Americans to remain calm and saying the risk of this virus to the general public is still low. Eric?
All right. Hopefully it remains that way. Christina, thank you. Arthel.
Eric, amid concerns over those suspected community transmission cases with no known origin in California and Oregon, the governor of Washington, Jay Inslee, declaring a state of emergency after the first coronavirus death inside the U.S., a man near Seattle. Meanwhile, in another Seattle suburb, officials are looking into a potential outbreak at a nursing home. Dan Springer is following all of this from Seattle. Dan?
Yeah, in Arthel, a new case of coronavirus has shut down an elementary school in the Portland, Oregon area after a staff member tested positive on Friday. They'll have that school shut down at least until Wednesday while they clean it. But most of the attention here in the Pacific Northwest, as you mentioned, is on a long-term care facility here in Kirkland, Washington. 2 people connected to the Life Care Center of Kirkland have tested positive for the virus. A resident patient in her 70s and an employee in her 40s, the first healthcare worker in the U.S. to contract COVID-19. The patient is in serious condition. The employee, good news, is unstable. As a result, the whole facility is being quarantined. Nobody is allowed to come into the facility. There are no visitors, and they're not taking new patients, obviously. Also, 32 firefighters and police officers from 2 different cities that had calls here over the last week, they are also being quarantined and monitored. Many of the 108 residents are experiencing some flu-like symptoms. They are being kept in their rooms and monitored. Meantime, Friday night, a man in his 50s became the first death in the U.S. tied to the coronavirus. He died at a hospital in Kirkland, and he did have underlying health problems. His death and the other new cases prompted Washington's governor to declare a state of emergency.
The COVID-19 situation is rapidly evolving on the global on a global scale, and in Washington, we are starting to see some spread of this virus. Therefore, we do feel that the risk to the general public is increasing. But as Dr. Duchin said, we do not feel that the risk that transmission is occurring on a widespread basis by any means.
However, another new case involves a student at Jackson High School in nearby Mill Creek, Washington. The teenage boy had symptoms on Monday, did go to school, got tested on Friday. He is feeling better now, but the school will be closed through Monday for disinfection. The school is trying to determine how many people had contact with this boy. They're reaching out to anybody who did have contact with him to get them monitored and tested if necessary. Arthel?
Dan Springer, thank you for that report there live in Seattle. Eric?
Arthel, as we saw yesterday at the White House, the Trump administration ramping up its response to this outbreak. Travel restrictions announced to countries reporting some new cases, among them Iran and parts of South Korea and Italy. Officials here are urging the public, though, not to panic, as they are working with drug companies to fast-track a vaccine for this. An Israeli firm announcing that it says it will have a vaccine ready within weeks. Rich Hudson live at the White House with what they're doing there today to try to stem this outbreak. Hey, Rich.
Hey, good afternoon, Eric. And much of the U.S. government response is focused on travel restrictions. That's why the U.S. has warned Americans against traveling to those areas where it's hardest hit in Italy and in South Korea, implementing screenings within those countries for those who are traveling to the United States. The U.S. had already been warning Americans against traveling to Iran because of kidnappings and the fact that the government might detain you there. Add to that now the fact that coronavirus cases, reported at least, is approaching 1,000. The U.S. is now banning all travel to Iran, barring entry to anyone who has visited Iran in the past 14 days. The administration has also offered to Iran assistance to confront this virus. Meanwhile, here, Vice President Mike Pence says the Centers for Disease Control is investigating cases within the U.S.
They consult with them because the objective is we get that patient treated, but we want to find out not just where they got it, but we want to find out who else may have been exposed so those people can receive the kind of treatment and have the kind of recovery that most Americans will have that even contract this disease.
The Food and Drug Administration is announcing expanded testing for the coronavirus within the U.S., making it much easier to spot patterns as the virus spreads. Also, as you're talking about the cases in Washington state, the discussion now is also focused on those who may have gotten the disease or had it transmitted, had never had traveled and gotten it within the United States.
At this point, it's a suspected community transmission. Any community transmission is concerning. That's why we've been very clear from the outset. We're going to have more cases here in the United States in spite of the president's aggressive efforts at containment.
Federal government also says it's initiating a process whereby the U.S. government would be moved up ahead in the line in contracts when it comes to ordering things like masks and gloves because of the U.S. government response to this disease. Also, the White House says President Trump will be meeting with pharmaceutical executives next week to discuss developing a vaccine for the coronavirus. Eric?
Yeah, and at the press conference, they said the best thing we all could do is wash your hands and don't touch your face. All right, Rich, thank you. Arthel?
And Eric, for more on this, we're going to bring in Dr. Peter Hotez. He is a professor and dean at Baylor University's National School of Tropical Medicine in Houston. Dr. Hotez, thanks for joining us. And got a couple of things I want to go over with you. If you could first give us your reaction. Thank you to this new case of the coronavirus overnight in Chicago and your level of concern overall about community transmission.
Yeah, so Dr. Redfield, our CDC director, about 10 days ago said this virus looks like it will gain a foothold in the United States.